Namaste. We are just going to proceed to the next lesson, the second lesson in the first book, Principles and Functions of Management. In this lesson, we shall be discussing about the principles of management propounded by different philosophers and thinkers. Before going into classical theory and neoclassical theory and general administration theory, we shall first understand what is the meaning of a principle, what is the meaning of principles of management, how are principles of management different from principles of science. People generally have a belief that principle and technique, principle and value are one and the same. We are going to find the difference between all these things. Then we shall be discussing about the nature of principles of management, nature and characteristic features of principles of management. Then after understanding the importance of principles of management, we shall be going in for two theories of management. One propounded by F.W. Taylor, which is called as classical theory, which talks about scientific principles. The second one is about Henry Fayol, administrative theory, general administrative theory. We shall be discussing about all these things in detail. Then we shall understand that both Taylor's principles and Fayol's principles are mutually complementary. So this is going to be the essence of this lesson. Now, what do you mean by principle? Now, how is this fan rotating? What is the difference in the application of principle of science between the oscillation of a fan and the oscillation of an exhaust fan? You find a difference between the two. Both are fans only, but one is working clockwise and the other one is working anti-clockwise. Why? One is intended to draw the external air into the house, and the other one is to exhaust the fumes from inside the house to the external environment, which means both cannot be with the same principle. One should be oscillating in the clockwise direction and the other one should be formulated in such a way that it is able to draw the air from within the house and let it outside. So that means there are two different principles. How does a train function? The train engine is one end and it is trying to pull about 30 compartments. What is the mechanism? It is working on certain principles. How does an earth mover work? It is working on certain principle. So, any principle is a matter of fundamental truth. So, when any principle is a matter of fundamental truth. Any principle is a matter of fundamental truth and it is not drawn just like that. It is not drawn by try-head, hit-and-rule method. It is drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation. All the principles are applied in one situation or the other. The results are analyzed and the output is confirmed. So, any principle is a matter of fundamental truth. Now, coming to what is the principle of management? So, any principle of management is a matter of fundamental truth upon which any managerial decision making takes place. So, remember, principles of management are the general guidelines upon which managerial decision making takes place. So, a principle of management is a matter of fundamental truth or a general guideline upon which any managerial decision making takes place. So, there are a lot of difference between manager A and manager B. The approach towards a particular problem or situation may differ between manager A and manager B. But ultimately, they have to use a common principle According to his or her own creativity, it has to be applied to the given situation to arrive the best solution. So, principles of management are general guidelines upon which any managerial decision making will be taken. Now, what are the differences between the principles of science and principles of management? Now, principles of science are the matters of fundamental truth which are drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation. They are experimented in laboratories and the results are accurate. So, what are the differences between principles of science and principles of management? Principles of science are drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation. They have accurate results because they have no scope for deviation at all. There is one element which is kept as constant and every other element is varied with the constant, with the element of the constant one, by which accurate results can be drawn. If this is the input, this is the output can be done. Fine. Now, for example, for constructing a building, what is the proportion between sand and cement? What is the proportion between brick and cement? Can be very well defined. And only if that composition is being used, building structure can be strong. So, that way it can be very precisely defined in any principle of science. But coming to principles of management, yes, principles of management are also drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation, no doubt at all. But what is the big difference between the principles of science and principles of management is the precision. We cannot expect accurate result as far as principles of management are concerned because of the one simple factor that principles of management involve human beings whose behavior is absolutely unpredictable. There may be two employees, both of them are assigned the job by the same manager, given same responsibility, same authority, same input, etc. But still, there will be a difference between the output produced by A from B. Because they both are human beings, they have their own logical reasoning skills, they have their own creativity, they have their own method of performing the job. Definitely there will be a variation. So the question of accuracy is a doubtful one as far as principles of management are concerned. So principles of science are very accurate, whereas principles of management are slightly less accurate than the principles of science. Number 2, principles of science allow no deviation at all. There will be zero deviation as far as principles of science are concerned. Whereas principles of management are highly flexible. They change according to the given situation. They change according to the human being's approach. Therefore, in this way also there is a difference between principles of science and principles of management. The next one is the difference between principle and technique. People think technique and principle are one and the same. Please remember, any principle is a matter of fundamental truth. So, it defines as to how to do a particular job. Technique defines the method of doing the job. So, technique defines the steps involved in completing a particular job. So, principle is a base upon which technique is lying. The next one is difference between principle and value. In general, we say, I am a principled person. He is a man of principles. That means he has certain values. That is what is being understood in a common sense. But precisely speaking, principles are having clear-cut definitions and all the principles have universal validity and all the principles are drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation. Whereas values are only accepted philosophies. They are all general connotations that people believe certain things. Why should on Diwali evening trading should take place? What is called as Muhurat time? Why not the evening 6 to 6:20? Why should it be the Muhurat time? Why not the morning 6 to 6:20 be Muhurat time? It's all accepted conventions. Why do we fall at the feet of the elders on auspicious days? There is no reason at all and nobody can question you even if you are not going to fall at the feet of the elders. No doubt at all. But there are certain values and philosophies. Fine. Why do you celebrate Karwa Chauth? Why do you celebrate Dhanteras? They are all accepted beliefs, accepted values, which vary from one society to another society, one religion to another religion, one country to another country. Whereas principles will not vary from one country to another country. Whichever the country, the size may vary, the people may vary, but the principle will remain to be the same. So these are the differences between principles and values. Now, let us discuss about the nature of principles of management. Now, from examination point of view, please keep one thing in mind. There are two types of questions: characteristic features of management, characteristic features of principles of management. So, the word principle is in between. Both are 5-mark questions only. If you misunderstand nature of management with nature of principles of management, you will lose at 5 marks. Please be very, very careful about that. Now, what is the nature of principles of management? Number 1, principles of management have universal applicability. Whether it is India or Iran or China or United States, principles of management remains to be the same. Whether it is a large scale organization or a small scale organization, whether it is a private organization or a government organization, principles of management will remain to be the same. They can be applied anywhere. They have universal applicability. But please remember, there is a difference between universal applicability and universal validity. In universal validity, the precision is there, which is not very possible in case of management. Therefore, we can say that your management principles have universal applicability. The second one, all the principles of management are providing general guidelines only. They do not fix a manager into a rigid jacket upon which he has to take any decision. Each and every individual is gifted with logical reasoning skills. Therefore, taking the fundamental truth as a base, the manager can take decisions appropriately to the given situation. So, principles of management can only give broad guidelines. It can be adapted to the given situation. The next one is formed by practice and experimentation. All the principles of management are drawn by practice and experimentation. Let us take one example of the principle of unity of command. The principle of unity of command says every subordinate should receive instructions only from one superior at a time, so that there will be no chaos and confusion. Now, to conclude whether it is really correct or not, manager should implement it and see. If he is going to give instructions, if 2 or more sub-superiors are going to give instructions at the same time to the subordinate, he will not know whose orders to follow first. And he might prioritize the work of the superior who is demanding more than the superior who is very democratic and diplomatic in approach. So, the principle of unity of command is also drawn by observation, analysis and experimentation. One more example, let's take the principle of division of work. The principle of division of work says how much ever capable the manager may be, he cannot do all the work by himself. His physical capacity to do all the work by himself is for sure limited only. So, naturally, he will not be able to control everything. Therefore, he has to divide the work among his subordinates, by which each and every worker will do only a small level of work. By which what happens is, the subordinates also tend to get specialized in completing the job. Fine. So, the principle of division of work is also drawn by practical experimentation. The next one is, all the principles of management are very much flexible. They can be changed, they can be adapted to the given situation. They can be accepted over different departments and different organizations. So, they are very much flexible. All the principles of management are mainly behavioral in nature. We already discussed that principles of management involve the nature of human beings whose behavior is absolutely unpredictable. So, how each and every manager reacts and responds to a given situation differs with his personal creativity and experience. by which what happens is ultimate result only should be seen and not the way by which he approaches the issue. So it is absolutely behavioral in nature. The next is every principle of management has cause-effect relationship. So the manager can clearly say if this is the cause, this is the effect. For example, let us take the example of a principle called span of control. Span of control is the principle which says number of subordinates which a superior can effectively control. So, number of subordinates a superior can effectively control is defined by the principle of span of control. Now, by observation and analysis, it is identified that at the lower level of management, a superior can control as many as 20 subordinates also, because the nature of work is very routine in nature. It is technical and it is going to be very much mechanical only. It doesn't involve much of thinking skills. Therefore, more number of subordinates can be controlled by a superior. Whereas at the top level management, where conceptual skills are required, constantly they have to evolve new strategies and policies. It is better to have only less number of people at the top level for effective controlling and for effective decision making. Limited number of people should be there at the top level. So, how has it been defined? That is why I told you already, it is in a pyramid shape. The structure of management is in a pyramid shape, narrow at the top and broad at the base. So, that says that it is better to have limited number of subordinates at the top level. So, this is also drawn by observation and analysis of management principles, by which the cause and effect relationship is very much defined. And management principles are contingent in nature. What happened yesterday need not necessarily happen today in management. It will vary. With a given situation, it will vary. So, management principles cannot be rigid or accurate because they involve human beings. So, their behavior is very much unpredictable. So, in this topic, we discussed about nature of principles of management. We shall now go for understanding the importance of principles of management. So, now going to the next one, importance of understanding principles of management. So, how a manager is successful, how a manager will benefit greatly by understanding the principles of management properly. If he is able to understand the principles of management properly and apply the principles of management in his day-to-day activities as the manager, he will definitely be a very, very successful manager. Now, number one, principles of management helps the manager to understand the reality. So, he is able to have a useful insight into reality. He can have big ambitions. He can build castles on the sky. Easily he can do. But the reality is very, very different. For example, the principle of division of work. The principle of division of work says, how much ever capable a manager may be, he cannot do all the work by himself because of his physical capacity. There is a difference between machine and human being in this respect. Even in case of machine, you cannot run the machine continuously. Definitely at a point in time, even the machine will stop working. So, that being the case, manager cannot do all the work by himself. If he understands the principle that if he is able to divide the work among the subordinates in such a way that each worker does only a particular work again and again, he knows pretty well that he will be able to get the maximum output from the worker. Each worker tends to be a specialist in his line of activity. Number two, by proper division of work. What is meant by proper division of work is the manager has to consciously, deliberately divide the work among the subordinates in such a way that the subordinates are able to complete the work exactly in the same manner as the manager would have done if he has done the job by himself. To that extent, if the manager is able to understand the principal, he will be able to divide the work among the subordinates properly. So, understanding the principles of management provides useful insight into reality. Number 2, by understanding the principles of management effectively, the manager is able to make the optimum utilization of resources and effective administration. He is able to bring in maximum output with minimum cost. But at the same time, there should be effectiveness in completing the job also. So, if he is able to understand the principles of management properly, he will be able to put into use of all the resources, human and non-human resources, to the best of their ability. The next one is principles of management facilitate the manager to take precise decisions. Accurate decisions can be taken if the manager is able to understand the principles of management effectively. For example, the principle of scalar chain. The principle of scalar chain says the flow of communication should flow from the top level to the lower level. So, the flow of communication should be from the top level to the lower level through prescribed channels of communication. So, the manager will be able to know if there is no proper channel of communication, the chain of command will likely to be distorted. There is a greater scope for rumors and gossips between the employees if the communication channel is not proper. So, he will be able to define the communication channel effectively if he understands the principles of management. The next one is meeting and changing environmental requirements. Please remember, I told you already, principles of management are the general guidelines. They are the fundamental truth for managerial decision making, but they are behavioral in nature. They are flexible in nature. They can be adapted to the given situation. The principle of centralization and decentralization is one example we can quote here. The principle of centralization says all the decision-making authority should be concentrated at the top level only. That means the middle level and the supervisory level will only execute whatever has been planned and formulated by the top level management. On the other hand, decentralization is a type of setup wherein the decision-making authority is dispersed among the various departmental heads, which means all the decision-making authority is divided between the various departmental heads. Therefore, the top-level management can concentrate on core areas and the top-level management will concentrate on the matters of high importance alone, by which it leads to greater creativity, greater independence at all levels. Now, these are the principles of centralization and decentralization. How is it implemented to different types of organization depends upon the organization. If an organization requires high degree of security, then the organization has to be a completely centralized setup only. But if the organization is going in for horizontal disintegration, there should be more heads to take care of different activities, which means the organization should be a decentralized setup. So, it depends on the organization, but the principle remains to be the same. The base, the bottom line remains to be the same. So, they are flexible and they can be changed to the given situation. Then, management principles makes the manager to understand and fulfill social responsibility. The principle of remuneration to personnel, the principle of equity, we can quote as example for that. Now, remuneration of personnel, the remuneration payable to the employee should be fair and just. What do you mean by fair and just cannot be precisely defined. What is fair to the management may not be fair to the employees. But the manager must ensure that same pay is ensured to the employees occupying the same job positions, by which he is able to maintain equity between the employees. There should be no discrimination between employees in terms of caste, creed or sex or religion. So that way he has to maintain the principle of equity, and the remuneration should be a satisfactory remuneration to the employee. And the manager cannot think that the employee should work for the satisfaction of doing the job, doesn't hold good at all. So these principles, these facts clearly say that understanding the principle of management facilitates the manager to fulfill social responsibility. So the last one is management training, education and research. Unless until the manager understands the principles of management, he cannot go for further training of the employees. There cannot be research and exploring the new avenues in management. So the principles of management should be thoroughly understood to define the level of training required for the employees, what type of new work to be completed, what are all new things that have to be adopted, etc. For example, the principle of unity of command and multiplicity of command. The principles of unity of command and multiplicity of command. This is one good example for application of principles of management in scientific research and training of employees. Now, unity of command is a principle which is originally originated, which says every subordinate must report to one superior at a time. He must receive instruction from one superior at a time. But today's world, we find the world is fast growing and the world is expanding like anything. That means no longer can we continue with the principle of unity of command. Every subordinate should receive instruction from many specialists at the same time. Many specialists. So, he will be receiving instruction from different specialists for the completion of a particular job. And each specialist will be an expert in his line of activity. Like how in a medical procedure, in a surgical procedure, many specialists are involved. You have a surgeon, you have a general physician, you have an anesthetist, you have a nursing assistant, you have a lab assistant. All of them will have to work together for the surgery to be very effective. This is today's trend. Earlier days, the same doctor will be a general physician as well as a surgeon also. Now we find there are changes coming up. Same way in management also, we find lot of changes coming up. New principles are coming, new techniques are being adopted because managers have understood the principles of management and putting them into practice in different ways. So, these points clearly highlight that if the manager is able to understand the principles of management clearly and if he is going to implement the principles of management properly, he will be able to understand the insight, he will be able to go deep into the reality, he will be able to make the best use of the resources, there will be no wastage of resources, effective administration will be there, all the decisions will be very scientific in approach, it will be accurate, then the manager will be able to adapt himself to the changing environment, manager will be able to take a social responsibility properly and new research and training will be adapted, accepted if the manager is able to understand the principles of management effectively. In the next session, we shall be discussing about the theories of management, theories of principles of management. So, we shall be discussing broadly about two theories, namely classical theory and general administrative theory. Thank you. Namaste.